I wanted to make sure that I told y'all what just happened. So I've been in oversight forever today, but now we are in our markup and it is in judiciary. And let me tell y'all what they just voted for. I want y'all to take a guess. Okay, y'all probably not gonna guess it because it don't make sense. But if you think of the most ridiculous thing that they could do, okay, I know that that's really hard too because everything that they do is quite ridiculous. But literally, they just voted. They being the other ones, not us, because we were all on the right side of history. They just voted to give Trump the ability, legally, to give him the ability to deport U.S. citizens. That is what they voted for.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you
a bunch of elected U.S. representatives. That is how they voted. Am I telling a lie, Eric, or no?
No, I got my...
If you want a burger, eat a burger. Bitch, if you want a french fry, eat a french fry.
Salad here. Mouthful. No. I'm stunned.
I'm not. But I'm glad that you... Oh, okay. Eric been here longer than me, but like...
So what we said was, we even said, you know what? Many of us will not offer any more amendments tonight. We won't vote for the overall bill. But if you agree to this, we'll drop any other amendments. We'll take the win that this would be in the bill, that you would agree U.S. citizens can't be deported. They voted to allow Donald Trump to deport U.S. citizens. And they did it during the week that we learned that a 4-year-old little girl fighting cancer, a U.S. citizen, has been deported, separated from her U.S. citizen father and her cancer treatment. So, yeah, it's kind of shocking.
There's more cases. There's also the incident of a child who's being treated for stage 4 cancer, also deported despite being a U.S. citizen. What's the information
That's
there?
right. This family was also on the same deportation flight from Louisiana to Honduras, and it included at least one U.S. citizen child, a 4-year-old boy who suffers from a severe form of cancer, and he was receiving medical care here in the U.S. Like in the other family, his mother was in the U.S. illegally and had a deportation order. But according to advocates, the family did not get a chance to consult with lawyers and also with doctors as to the child's health condition before the deportation took effect. And now that family is also now in Honduras. ICE's position and the administration's legal position is that the children who are U.S. citizens by virtue of their American citizenship can ultimately come back when they want to, but we're talking about children again, and the parents who were deported are now banished from the U.S. for at least 5 years, so they cannot come with them back to the U.S. So the open question is how those children will be able to come back to American soil.
Precisely. And
well, he's shocked. Y'all, listen now. I came in with nothing but fools. So he been here longer, so maybe he still has a little bit of shock in his life, but I don't personally. Because the fact is, we used to live in a world in which where we saw the news about that baby that got deported, the baby with cancer, because supposedly he the man that's all about the children with cancer, right? Like, that's why he made sure one of his guests was at the State of the Union was a child with cancer. So surely, even though they're cutting cancer funding, but like, it is a U.S. citizen. Like, there honestly isn't even this real thing of like deporting a U.S. citizen. As far as I'm concerned, you randomly kidnapping folk and you throwing them out of the country against their civil rights, against their constitutional rights.
Who's gonna watch the baby? Me?
And frankly, how would they feel if some other country decided that they were going to just start throwing people randomly in our country?
Well, I think maybe the border is the most significant because our country was really going bad. They were allowing people to come in from prisons, as you know, and you've heard me say it, but you've heard a lot of people say it. Prisons, mental institutions, gang members, murderers. We had many murders, 11,888, they think. Some murdered more than one person. So you had murderers coming in, you had everybody coming in, and not just South America, from all over the world. They were emptying their prisons into our country.
Like, that is absolutely insane. So yes, all I gotta say is y'all need to get these fools out of here. But Deborah is so much nicer about how she says things. You know, she wasn't them real. She's one of them real good, nice lawyers. Okay, listen, I can only imagine how Deborah was in the courtroom, honey. But Deborah also sits on judiciary. So tell us, I mean, what are your thoughts? How do you explain that this is what they decided to do?
They're mean. they're heartless, and they're cruel. And they do not care about anybody except themselves.
Now we have this measles outbreak, biggest in a decade in Texas, and it's because people aren't getting their children vaccinated. Do you recommend to parents that they get their children vaccinated for measles?
Well, I recommend the governors to make the decisions. You have a very talented governor of Texas, and he's making decisions, and those decisions are going to be made rapidly.
But if you're going to be able to deport U.S. citizens, then they're coming for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So again, like all those people that are saying that they have some sort of buyer's remorse about their votes because they never thought that this was going to impact them and that kind of stuff or whatever. Here's the reality. When we go out and make votes, instead of going out and deciding that you're going to vote for the person that is going to be quote unquote perfect, what you need to be doing is looking for somebody that at least has some common decency. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, I can tell you, if it was somebody else that was in office other than him as the president of the United States, maybe we would have had a different result. But they are so afraid. They are afraid to do what is right. Again, I keep trying to tell people, this isn't about partisanship. This is about right versus wrong. Now listen, y'all know this fighter. She stays on the front lines at all times. Now they're trying to double back and say, well, he's this terrible person and all this kind of stuff. But here's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person that's sitting in the White House. Because last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. I don't even think he has any outstanding cases versus the guy that still had cases pending when he was sworn in on January 20th and also has 34 felony convictions. So listen, I don't want to hear anything from the Republican Party about how they trying to keep us safe when their fearless leader is actually the biggest criminal thus far that we have seen, because I haven't seen anybody with a rap sheet that looks like the president's. To our Constitution just yet, but it is scary that we have someone in the White House that absolutely does not care about the Constitution and does not care about the law. But we knew this. As the only convicted felon to occupy the White House, he's never had any respect for the law, and I honestly don't see him changing his tune anytime soon. Now, we'll see if he ends up running up against a bunch of Eileen Cannon judges who will just ignore the law. Have y'all seen the report that was just produced where this chairman decided that he was going to block this committee from receiving additional information about y'all's guy, Trump, and all the money that he took? From what we did receive, we know that Trump got almost $6 million that we can account for, and we know that there's more there. From China specifically, we found almost $8 million total that he accepted from foreign governments while he was serving as the president of these United States. But we're concerned about the president's son, the president. I'm just curious, and this is yes or no. Is Trump's name ever mentioned in Project 2025? Yes or no? Just yes or no. I got you.
Within the document itself,
yes.
There are a number of references to the former administration.
So is Trump's name mentioned just one time?
I believe it's mentioned more.
Okay. 5 times.
I haven't counted.
Oh, okay. Well, if I told you that his name is mentioned approximately 312 times, would you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't have any reason to.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's interesting that we want to try to pretend. We're not going to pretend in here. We're going to work with facts and not fiction. But no, tell us, because actually this was your amendment. It was. So this is the author of the amendment. And we all thought it was common sense, but as we are learning, common sense ain't so common.
Yeah. No, look, here's the thing. This amendment was not introduced because it's theoretical. No. It is actually happening that U.S. citizens are being deported. Not just one, not just two, multiple U.S. citizens are being deported, detained and deported by ICE. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I introduced into the record the document, the policy document, the law that ICE cannot detain and deport U.S. citizens. Yeah. That's actually the law. Yeah. So it's illegal what they're doing.
El Salvador, at the White House today, amid an ongoing legal fight over a Maryland man the administration admits was mistakenly deported and sent to a notorious prison in El Salvador. Late last week, the Supreme Court ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of Kilmar Brego Garcia to the United States. But the Department of Justice insists the federal courts lack the authority to make that demand. Sitting in the Oval Office today, President Bukele, who has emerged as a key ally in President Trump's deportation effort, said he will not release Abrego Garcia from El Salvador's mega prison.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
And during that meeting, President Trump also took his mass deportation agenda one step further, suggesting he's looking at deporting American citizens who commit violent crimes.
We also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
President Trump was talking about so-called homegrown terrorists. Do you think the president is actually realistically considering deporting American citizens here?
Well, I just spent the last couple of hours talking to legal experts on that very issue, and, it's pretty clear that he can't do this under existing law. Mm-hmm. The whole immigration laws, when they talk about deporting people, they're not talking about U.S. citizens, right? They're talking about immigrants who don't have legal status in the U.S. Mm-hmm. The whole immigration laws, when they talk about deporting people, they're not talking about U.S. citizens, right? They're talking about immigrants who don't have legal status in the U.S. And you'd have to completely rewrite all the laws and also raise a whole bunch of constitutional questions for that to ever happen.
Lawrence, I want to play some of what Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, said earlier today in the Oval Office. Let's listen.
The Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13.
And we should know that the administration has not provided any real evidence that Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13. His family denies it. There was an immigration judge that said he may have been affiliated with it.
And Ted Lieu, our colleague, said, it's batshit crazy that you got to introduce this amendment. He said that on the record. And I said, you know what? It is batshit crazy. But the reason I have to do this
is because they don't follow the law.
Is because they're not following the law. And then I asked the Republicans on the other side, you were elected by U.S. citizens, by constituents.
Right.
And you are now saying, if you vote no on this amendment, you are saying that you're not going to stand up for the constituents, the U.S. citizens
that you work for,
that send you here,
right?
And it was just stunning.
The ones that pay your check.
Now I did notice that some of them just didn't come to the vote because they didn't want to be on the record. They didn't want to vote.
Some of them skipped out on the vote.
They skipped out on the vote. So you should check the record. And if you have a Republican that represents you wherever you are, you should call them up and say, do you support Trump's ability to use ICE illegally to detain and deport U.S. citizens?
No, you aren't deporting citizens at this point.
Well, let me ask you, did they get hearings when Biden allowed 21 million, because I think the number is 20 million people to flow into our country? You had 21 million people that came into our country through a stupid open border, and they were prisoners, and they were people that you don't want in many cases in our country, right? They came from all over the world. They came from the Congo. They came from South. They came from all over the world. We're talking about some of the roughest countries in the world. They had here, including terrorists, by the way. Now,
but
did we give them a hearing when they came in?
Well, the law requires that every single person who is going to be deported gets a hearing first.
Well,
do you acknowledge that?
I'll have to ask the lawyers about that. All I can say is this. If you're going to have 21 million people, and if we have to get a lot of them out because they're criminals, we're going to have to act fast. We can't. Do you think we can give 21 million trials? Let's say each trial takes 2 weeks. Is that what you want us to do?
The law is the law, sir. The law is the law, and you're
the law
sworn
doesn't
to
say anything
uphold it.
about trials.
No, not trials, hearings. I said
These
hearings.
people came in, they're not citizens. They came in illegally. They came into our country illegally.
And
we have to get them out.
There's a legal process for that.
I can't, sure, and we follow the legal process. I can't have a trial, a major trial for every person that came in illegally. We have thousands of murderers that came in They're going to murder people. They already have murdered people in our country.
Right, so
we have to get them out, and we have to get them out fast.
Really bad guys, but in our country, even bad guys get due process, right?
If people come into our country illegally, there's a different standard. These are illegal. They came in illegally.
But they get due process.
Well, they get a process where we have to get them out. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the Venezuelans.
They get whatever my lawyers say.
Right. All right, let's talk about the Venezuelans. You deported more than 200 Venezuelans to that prison in El Salvador. You say they're violent, they're gang members, they're terrorists. Many of them don't have a criminal record at all.
Well,
but I want to.
I'm not so sure about that. If you take a look,
I want to read you something.
Excuse me. When you look at those people, they were violent people. They were violent people.
But many of them don't have a criminal record
Go
at this
ahead.
point.
I want
to read you something. Well, it's based on their lawyer, what their lawyers have said. Okay. Joe Rogan said this. Joe Rogan, one of the leading podcasters, Trump supporter, about the deportation of Venezuelans. He said, quote, rounding up gang members and shipping them to El Salvador with no due process, he said it was dangerous, and added, quote, we got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters. Is Joe Rogan right?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, we want to be careful, and we are careful. We're doing something that has to be done. We have a country that's very sick. Joe Biden, and it's not him because I don't even think he knew what the hell was happening, but the people around him are vicious people, and what they've done to the country is unbelievable. They've allowed 21 million people to pour into our country. Many of these people are criminals. They've allowed you mentioned Venezuela, the jails of Venezuela to be emptied into the United States. Do you know Venezuela crime is way down? Way, way down. You know why? Because their criminals are now living happily in the United States of America, and we're getting them out. And I was elected to get them out, and we're getting them out.
Under the law.
And we're getting them out fast, and we're getting them out legally. Now, in some cases, we have judges. In some cases, they're radical left judges. What happened the other day where a judge was protecting a criminal was horrible. And I think she's got big problems, frankly. And there are a couple of them like that.
I want to talk about one
Wait a
man.
minute.
Yep.
We have to be treated fairly by judges. And we're not being treated fairly by all judges.
Oh, that's a subject. So you're saying that you don't like some of the rulings, some of the court orders?
I think the rulings will be overturned, yeah.
All right. Let me ask you about one man and one court order. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's the Salvadoran man who crossed into this country illegally, but who is under a protective order that he not be sent back to El Salvador. Your government sent him back to El Salvador and acknowledged in court that was a mistake. And now the Supreme Court has upheld an order that you must return him facilitate his return to the United States. What are you doing to comply?
Well, the lawyer that said it was a mistake was here a long time, was not appointed by us, should not have said that, And just so you understand, the person that you're talking about, you're making this person sound, this is a MS-13 gang member, a tough cookie, been in lots of skirmishes, beat the hell out of his wife, and the wife was petrified to even talk about him, okay? This is not an innocent, wonderful gentleman from Maryland.
I'm not saying he's a good guy. It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands, sir.
He came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has ordered you to facilitate that.
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
Supreme Court says what the law is.
Listen, I was elected to take care of a problem. It was a unforced error that was made by a very incompetent man, a man that turned out to be incompetent, that you always said was wonderful, a great genius, right? And now you find out, all of the media now, they're saying what a mistake they made. A man who was grossly incompetent allowed us to have open borders where millions of people flowed in. I campaigned on that issue. I wouldn't say it was my number one issue, but it was pretty close.
Right up there.
I campaigned on that issue. I've done an amazing job. I have closed borders. He said you couldn't do it. You wouldn't be able to do it. It would never happen. Well, it happened, and it happened very quickly. Wait a minute. When we have criminals, murderers, criminals in this country, we have to get them out, and we're doing it.
By law.
And you'll pick out one man, but even the man that you picked out, he said he wasn't a member of a gang. And then they looked, and on his knuckles, he had MS-13.
There's a dispute
Well,
over that.
Wait a minute. He had MS-13 on his knuckles tattooed.
He had some tattoos that are interpreted that way. But let's move on.
Wait a minute. Hey, Terry.
He did not have the letter MS-13.
It says MS-13.
That was Photoshop. So let me
That was Photoshop, Terry. You can't do that. Hey, they're giving you the big break of a lifetime. You know, you're doing the interview. I picked you because, frankly, I never heard of you, but that's okay. But I picked you, Terry. Hey, but you're not being very nice. He had MS-13 tattooed.
We'll agree to disagree. I want to move on to something else.
Terry, do you want me to show you the picture?
I saw the picture.
And
We'll
you think it
agree
was
to disagree.
Photoshop? Well,
Here we go.
Don't Photoshop it. Go look at his hand. He had MS-13.
He did have tattoos that can be interpreted that way. I'm not an expert on them. I want to turn to Ukraine.
No,
sir.
Terry,
I want to get to Ukraine.
No. He had MS as clear as you can be, not interpreted. This is why people no longer believe the news, because
when
it's
he was
fake
photographed
news.
in El Salvador, they aren't there. But let's just go on. They aren't there when he's in El Salvador.
They weren't there, but they're there now, right?
No,
but they're there
in
now.
your picture.
Terry.
Ukraine, sir.
He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
All right.
Okay?
Well, we'll take a look.
You do such a disservice.
We'll take a look at that,
Why don't you
sir.
just say, yes, he does, and, go on to something else?
It's contested. Ukraine.
Because if you don't, you should be speaking out right now. And if you do, we are in a whole hell of a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm already at the point that we are in a whole hell of a lot of trouble, to be perfectly honest. And the other thing that Pramila is too nice to say is when you looked across that aisle, for those that sit on judiciary that decided to take this vote, the reason that they can sit there and take this vote and not even blink is because so many of them sit in privilege. When I look across that aisle, I don't know. I think we have one person that may have a little bit of melanin.
Shut your stupid ass up.
For the most part, they don't. And so what we know is that there's so much racial profiling that is taking place. There are certain people that maybe because they have an accent, you want to just say, oh, well, that can't be a U.S. citizen. That is not true. There are certain people, because of the complexion that they have, that is who is being targeted. So you know what? They are not concerned because they know the quote unquote types of U.S. citizens that are going to be directly impacted by this. Now, I got this legend, and I don't know if you want to say anything. He over here trying to eat. But what you got to say for the people, Mr. Nadler? Okay, yeah, he eating. He say no.
I'm ready.
Okay. New York in the building.
We in New York understand, most of us, constitutional law. We understand constitutional rights, and that's why we only have 5 Republicans.
New York, that's 5 too many, y'all. It's 5 too many, New York.
A few of whom we'll probably defeat, maybe all of them next year.
And to our fearless leader. I feel like I've been with him my whole congressional career. That's because I have, actually. What do you have to say?
Well, first of all, hello to all the friends of Jasmine Crockett out there.
Wait a damn minute.
She's doing a fantastic job for everybody. Look, the first 2 votes have got to be read together. The first one, we said, okay, nobody should be deported from the country without due process. They refused.
Where is due process found?
Due process is found in the 5th Amendment to the Constitution.
Constitution, yeah.
And what does due process mean? It means, like, before they deprive you of your life, your liberty, or your property, you get to hear what the charges are against you. You get to put on your evidence, as Jasmine Crockett has done as a lawyer and as a member of Congress. There's got to be some structure to it, so it's fair, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be a neutral fact finder, right? Who decides? All right, that's all we're saying.
And hopefully prevents these mistakes.
So before you get sent out of the country, there's got to be due process. There's got to be a fair hearing, right? And our colleagues refused to vote for that,
Yes.
despite the fact that the Supreme Court just said in a 9-0 decision that there's got to be, and that includes everybody on that Supreme Court. That's pretty incredible that all 9 of them would actually say, yeah, we agree. There's got to be due process.
And the last time I checked, the Constitution, that's supposed to be the highest law that we have in the land. That's what I thought.
Supreme law of the
That's what I
land.
thought.
Not Donald
He's
Trump.
constitutional professor, yeah.
So the first one says, okay, we said you can't deport people without due process. The Republicans said no. The second one, Ms. Jayapal's amendment, she said, well, you can't deport or detain U.S. citizens if you're ICE, right? That's not your job.
Right.
I thought that was a slam dunk. Okay, they're not going to vote again. They voted against that. They voted it down. You put those two together, and they seem to be indifferent if ICE is actually detaining and deporting U.S. citizens. And guess what? That's not hypothetical. That happened last week, where there were U.S. citizen kids who were sent outside of the country. So we're entering a brave new world here with all of their Orwellian, Kafkaesque stuff. And we're just getting started, though, because we're going to now pin them down on everything. We're going to have amendments on everything to see where they really stand on the Constitution.
Yeah. So you just heard it directly from Jamie Raskin. He is trying to teach these people some constitutional law, y'all. They ain't trying to listen. They act like it's only one amendment in the Constitution, the second, and they read that one wrong. Listen, if you care about this country, if you care about the Constitution, if you care about anything, then you will go and tell somebody what we have just educated you on. I got Becca Ballard. Listen, I'm trying to let her finish. But here's the deal. It is so frustrating because we could see the writing on the walls as we went out and we tried to educate people about what it was that they were up to. If they have it their way, this country would only be full of Elon Musk and Trump and they other billionaire friends and whoever is willing to work for them for little to nothing and have no health care and not be able to really afford food and not be able to afford a roof over their head, because we are working on reconciliation, meaning we are working on the budget. And so what we were saying in these amendments was you can't fund this type of activity. That's all we were saying, because it's already illegal. So you wouldn't need to keep doing like the same law over and over. But we're like, okay, maybe we just need to take your coins away. And then maybe y'all will stop, because maybe you'll be like, well, I'm not going to get no money for doing this. So this is actually about the coins, okay? So I want to clarify, because I know some of y'all may be confused. Like, well, if it's already the law, why y'all talking about it? Okay, it is the money side of it. I just want to make sure I'm making that clear.
Always follow the money.
Follow the money.
Always follow the money.
This is the amazing Becca Balance.
You're too kind.
From the great state of Vermont. What do you think about what's happening so far? We got a long night ahead of us, y'all.
They are willing to throw over all of our rights. They are willing to throw over the freedom and the liberty of their own people in order to worship at the feet of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They don't care about their constituents. They don't care about working people. It is about delivering more cash to people at the top. You follow the money and where it goes, and it's about kicking working people in the teeth, propping up people who don't need the advantages they already have, and meanwhile, creating a police state. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
With what we just saw in committee right there. They will not promise not to spend money to detain and deport American citizens.
Yeah.
This couldn't be more clear.
This is all about doing whatever it is, allowing Donald Trump the latitude to do the things that he wants to do. This is my second markup for the day. My first was in oversight, and when I was there, I mean, the things that they were trying to do, they're trying to bust up unions. They are over there saying things like, you know what, we don't want federal workers to have the protections that they would normally have in being a federal worker. We need to make them all at will so that we can fire them whenever we want to. So essentially admitting that they know that what they did when they started firing everybody, they knew it was illegal. So now they are trying to change federal worker status so that they can do this stuff lawfully. Like, I'm telling y'all, this is absolutely insane. It is bad, bad, bad. But make sure that you don't just get on IG, listen to me, make sure that you go and you educate somebody else, because we are in this position because of a lack of education, because we allowed ourselves to be played, or we allowed ourselves to be riled up about things that, frankly, we ain't never had no president that was trying to decide what kids can play on the playground. The president is supposed to do things like make sure that those kids can have food in their mouths, roofs over their heads, and food in their mouths. I think I may have already said that. Anyway, if that buzz in your hair means I gotta go vote. But I just wanted to check in with y'all. I appreciate y'all. We gonna keep fighting. The blue team got your back.
100 days into your second term. So what's the one thing, just one thing, that you think is the most significant thing you've done so far in these 100 days?
Well, I think maybe the border is the most significant because our country was really going bad. They were allowing people to come in from prisons, as you know, and you've heard me say it, but you've heard a lot of people say it. Prisons, mental institutions, gang members, murderers. We had many murderers, 11,888, they think. Some murdered more than one person. So you had murderers coming in, you had everybody coming in, and not just South America, from all over the world. They were emptying their prisons into our country. And now it's totally closed down.
Hello, Congresswoman.
Horse manure. Well, that sounds like fun.
Wait, Congresswoman Crockett. Congresswoman Crockett, you were recently on a Tesla takedown call calling for violence on the 29th. Would you like to clarify your comments?
As you can see.
Congresswoman, will you condone violence at the